Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 701 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today we're going to talk with Monica, who was diagnosed at 3 years old, but today she's 61. Monica has a rich life full of interesting experiences, and she's here today to tell us about them. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. You do not have to ask a doctor to go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Join the registry and fill out the survey. That you can do of your own accord. T1dexchange.org/juicebox. When you take the survey, you're supporting people with type 1 diabetes and the Juicebox Podcast. Are you looking for the Diabetes Pro Tip series? It begins at episode 210, and you can also find it at diabetesprotip.com and juiceboxpodcast.com, or in the private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. There's a list of the Diabetes Pro Tip series and all of the series within the podcast. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by InPen from Medtronic Diabetes. InPen is an insulin pen that talks to an application on your smartphone and gives you much of the functionality that you will get from an insulin pump. InPentoday.com. The podcast is also sponsored today by US Med. Don't just get your diabetes supplies from anywhere. Get them from US Med. Call today for your free benefits check, 888-721-1514, or you could just go to usmed.com/juicebox. US Med always provides 90 days worth of supplies, and they give you fast and free shipping. usmed.com/juicebox. Are you wearing a headset?
I'm wearing, yes, like a ear pod thing, earbud, whatever you call it.
No, it's working well.
Because the computer I have doesn't have like a plug-in for the other kind. And I was like, oh, crap. This was before. I have to buy some Bluetooth ones.
I think you could have gotten an adapter. You were looking for an excuse to buy yourself some nice Bluetooth headphones, weren't you?
Yes. It gave me a great excuse, and I'm always looking for those.
It's okay to say that to me. By the way, you are being recorded, so whoever you were hiding the purchase from might hear this one day.
I don't really hide them.
The other day, my wife says to me, I bought a sofa. And I went, what?
Hello?
I'm like, what's happening? So she's completely overtaken our dining room. COVID, and I think she's learned that she likes working from home, and she thinks she's going to be doing it at least a number of days a week, forever probably. And she says to me, I'm going to get rid of the dining room table, take this light off the ceiling, get a desk, and put a sofa in here. And she was just saying it. You know what I mean? Like I was like, oh yeah, whatever you want to do. And meanwhile, I was like, where are we going to eat? But it's fine. I guess we didn't really use the dining room that much anyway. And then one day she's like, I ordered a sofa. It's pink. I've always wanted a pink sofa. I said, okay. Well, okay. I didn't even know what to say. It's not a big deal.
It's like, well then.
I didn't care. She just bought a sofa. Now I feel like if I would have bought a sofa, it might not have gone the same way.
There may have been questions.
I feel like somebody would have been like, let me see this sofa. Why do you think this is necessary? Where is it going to go? Please explain your, actions. I just stood there. I was like, okay, sofa. Anyway, Monica, you seem pretty relaxed.
So I wrote this little note down that I'm nervous, but it was funny to me because a number of years ago, I had media training because I would go on TV, radio, et cetera, for the state dietetic association. And I also spoke to a lot of groups, nutrition, just kind of, basic things. But, and I'd always have the little trickle of sweat down my back, and then I was good. And then I thought, why am I nervous? I'm talking to one individual, it was just a funny thought, it's like,
Yeah, no one's ever going to
all
see you,
good.
right? The funny thing is that if that was local television you were doing,
Yeah.
you might be talking to more people doing this than you have in the past, but it's still just you and I speaking at the moment, so it's no big deal.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's great.
What I did learn one that the radio shows that I did, often I did them around the holidays and, talk about tips, and people might call in or might not. I learned that years later, they were still replaying them, and some of them went all the way across the state of Arkansas. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that. But I mean, I didn't care. It was just kind of a funny thing when someone said they heard me again on the radio. And I thought, that was like 2 years ago.
So I've done I forget what they call them, but they put me in a room and it was, you're on a set, right? And you were dressed nicely and mic'd up, and it would go back and forth. Like you'd be on like morning television, and then you'd be on morning radio, then morning radio, then morning and it would and I did it for like, I think 4 or 5 hours straight. And I was dizzied by the time it was over. I did it with a nurse practitioner. I don't remember her name. And we only talked about sending your kids on sleepovers when they had diabetes. And
Oh, wow.
it was exhausting. I couldn't believe how difficult it was by the time it was over.
Yeah.
But
Well, great that you did it. I'm sure it was appreciated by a lot of people.
oh, let me be clear. I was paid to do it.
That's okay.
Okay.
It's all good.
It was an
It's all
interesting,
good.
it was an interesting, it's funny. It was back around. Do you remember Lilly Diabetes had those little Disney books?
Yes.
They actually stopped. I think Lilly and Disney stopped their partnership recently. I don't know if they've announced it yet, but I think it's done. And and it was around that first book. It was like Coco's first sleepover or something, like, if I'm remembering it right. And we just I'll never forget getting that call, and Lily was like, "Would you do this?" And I said, I guess so. So I went to New York City. I spent the night, got up early in the morning, went to a studio, and just talked about sleepovers for 5 hours. We're not going to do that now. Tell me how old you are and when you were diagnosed.
Sure. I am 61 years old, and I was diagnosed when I was 3, which would be 1963.
1963, 61 years old. I have to admit, I thought you had diabetes for a long time. And then when you came on, your voice sounded so young that I thought maybe I read the wrong description for a person when I sat down.
So I'm so lucky that, in the two gene pools, mom and dad, on my mom's side, there was always this youthful appearance and energy and all that. And my dad's side, they just seemed to look older. And my parents were only 9 months apart, but people used to mess with him like, "Who's that young girl you married?" And they thought there was about a 10-year age difference. And so I'm fortunate I followed mom's side. So great as my dad was, I'm just for the other part.
Yeah. You just have a great voice. And
Oh, thank you.
I would not have been able to guess your age from your voice, which is neither here nor there, but that's how it struck me when you jumped on. Okay, so you were diagnosed in the early 60s. How old were you again?
Yes. 3.
3.
So my mom kept so many things, but what she told me, my mom and dad are both now deceased. My mom died a little over a year ago in 2020, and she was 90. So
Wow.
Longevity there. But she said over the years that I started asking for sweet drinks. I don't know if that was soda or what, or juice. And I began wetting the bed, and that was very unusual. One, they didn't give us a lot of sweet drinks. There might've been some fruit, like apple juice, orange juice, milk, those kind of things, water. And so those were unusual. And so she took me to the doctor. So I never was like deathly ill. And
she saw it pretty quickly.
The cute story, and that I also remember, like, these, you have flashes of the kids stuff. I never felt bad. So she took me to the family doctor, Dr. Folsom. Isn't that funny? I remember his name. And then I don't know what, I think they did a blood test, and then they sent me over to Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, because we lived in Los Angeles then. And I'm guessing that the care there was really, really good, but I never felt bad. And during the hospital stay of a couple of weeks, um, they would they would be looking for me because there was a chair by they put me in like a crib, and there was a chair by the crib, and I figured out how to climb out, and I'd go visit what I called the sick kids. And so my mom said there'd be these paging overhead, looking for me when they came, because they'd have to go home at night to sleep. But anyway, it was just funny. Just, I was never felt sick.
You didn't think of yourself that way.
What's that?
Even at a young age, you didn't think of yourself that way. Did that carry through your life?
Yes, absolutely. I've never felt funny about and talking about being diabetic, but I also that wasn't my first thought.
Okay.
I was a tomboy. I was active. Going through these records that my sister-in-law sent when they packed up my mom and dad's house. I was in every imaginable play, tumbling, everything from, as young as you were able to. My mom signed us up at the different, little theaters and parks and rec and whatever kinds of things were available to us.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that your management allowed you not to really think about diabetes too much, right? Because you were probably just getting, that wasn't even regular and MPH at that point, right? Was that beef and pork?
It was beef and pork, and I don't know which one I was on. I was on one shot a day, and it was not, I remember your other person you interviewed not too long ago was talking about lenti and semi-lenti. I was never on that.
Okay.
And they use these glass syringes that they stored in a metal pan that had a lid on it, and there was alcohol in it. And I heard another one of your interviews where somebody said something, they boiled theirs. I'm sure they did that too, but between boilings, it was in this metal pan.
Okay.
And that stayed in the master bathroom, or the bathroom attached to the master bedroom. And I also found, again, my mom, I guess, semi-hoarder, the dietitian's notes of how to feed me, in essence. And they followed the TAG, total available glucose method, which accounts for, they calculate glucose effect from carbohydrate, protein, and fat. And that was in 1963.
Interesting.
Yes. And my mom had the records from 1963 and 1977 that the dietitian had given her. And there was a couple of questions. My mom was a health nut, so asking about tofu at some point. Grilled liver was on my food list. Do
you remember eating
somewhere
that?
In there, I must have had that.
I was going to say, that doesn't sound good. Did your mom keep the syringes or the vials or anything?
I don't have any of those.
Okay.
Because we lived in Southern California for a long time, but then there have been several moves following that. So I think in the course of some of those moves, those things didn't follow. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I can't remember at what point I went from one shot to more, but I have, you have these little flashes of things. So I remember we were struggling with blood sugar. I must have been pre-teenish, teen, and nobody could explain why. And finally, we ended up with a female physician. And she said, well, it's probably her hormones. And, it's just weird how information comes in those old days, in quotes, Yeah. And so I just know I was always able to be super active. I did everything.
I have a couple of questions. So first, let me say this because it's stuck in my head now. I don't know what episode it was, but I remember someone talking about having broken their glass syringe and that it being a significant financial strain on the family. And they didn't know what to do. So they actually went to the pharmacist, who gave them another and then put them on a payment plan. And then their parent had to show up at the pharmacy weekly and put a little money on it. It was almost like layaway that you got to take home with you.
Oh my.
Yeah. And Monica, you're banging something on the desk. I don't know.
No.
You're not fidgeting or touching things?
Oh, I did take one sip of a drink.
Oh, you're allowed to do,
Sorry.
no, you're allowed to do that.
And I guess when I set it down, it must have come
It's
through.
very
Huh.
loud. Yes, yes. That don't worry about that. And so, but I'm always really interested about your remembrance of how you tracked your health back then. Were you peeing on sticks or what were you doing?
It is, I mean, you think about so the dark age thing, it's comical, but my dad had some mathematical formula, and lucky for us, he got his bachelor's degree in mathematics, and he'd
Mhm.
always been doing that or engineering type things. But he was given some formula, and I just remember him taking the dipstick results. Okay, the dipstick. So you're either showing ketones or you're not. I mean, the dipstick. And so the urine dipstick, he plugged some number in somewhere. They came up with how many of these total available glucose grams I was going to eat and the resultant amount of insulin. And I just remember him standing in the bathroom. He had some little logbook, notebook, something there, and he would run his formula. I don't have any record of that. I just, again, young kid watching your dad while you wait on your shot.
That's so your father figured something out on his own to help you.
I think the hospital taught them something.
Okay. But it was a lot of
And
math and
yes,
a lot of
but
figuring.
no technology and periodic go to the family doctor and get your blood drawn.
Were
And I
you
have, yeah.
were you
Right.
getting you so there was no blood draws to track your health. Was there, I mean, were you peeing on sticks to get colors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Yep.
what did those colors? I see, I'm always amazed by this because the color would tell you you were too high or too low, but then there was no next step to take, right?
Correct.
Yeah. That's why people
And the
stop
blood
doing it.
draws were at the family doctor. I don't know the frequency, but I'd go in there and they'd find out my blood sugar periodically.
Yeah, and that wasn't, was that an A1C even back then? It
No,
wasn't, right?
no.
No, no, no.
A1Cs were not like till the 80s.
80s. That's what I keep thinking.
And my brother was diagnosed with type 1 in 1975. So they lived dark ages for probably 7, 8 years.
Oh,
Also,
wait a second. So your brother older or younger brother?
younger. I've got an autoimmune family. I've got psoriatic rheumatoid arthritis with my older sister, and I've got type 1 diabetes with my brother, younger.
How bad's that arthritis? Like to live
She's
with?
in rough shape. Unfortunately, she carries some extra weight. She also has hypothyroid. She has all matters of stuff, and I'm not sure she's had all the right testing done. I
Mhm.
was texting with her the other day because I was listening to your doctor that's the specialist in thyroids, and I figure I gotta keep learning on that side.
Try to
I
help
didn't
them
even realize all these other autoimmune stuff were tied back to the
together.
T1D people. I
Yeah.
had no idea till I started listening and seeing. I guess I just lived in this pretty good world. It didn't happen to me.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this, that I don't know a ton about the arthritis, but I can tell you that if her thyroid isn't well managed, then she could be having pain, joint pain, stuff like that that might not be helping the arthritis.
Yeah.
Could be making things worse at the very least.
Yep. I
Yeah.
plan to I plan to talk further with her and we'll try to figure out next steps. But because I think that somewhere there's missing puzzles. She has really severe asthma. She has a number of things.
Asthma too, huh?
Hmm.
Hmm. Interesting. How old is she now?
She's 2 years older than me,
Than
so
you.
she'd be 63, and my brother is 5 years younger than me.
Okay. Um, did you and your brother have any kind of kinship around diabetes, or were you, I mean, you would have still been in the house when he was diagnosed, right?
So sort of. So what happened? I was 15. So I was talking to him in the last month or so, and I was just asking him questions too, because there's stuff that I don't remember. And I said, so keep in mind when I ask you these things, one, I got moved with my dad temporarily to Virginia, not because of a separation of my parents, it had to do with jobs, but my brother was diagnosed right before that, and I'm 15. I'm a rotten teenage brat. I'm a girl going through hormones. I'm in high school, living my life. And so he's my little brother. If you know what I mean? Not that I didn't care about him,
I think I
but
do. Yeah.
It's just kind of how it is with siblings. And I remember he had a 1-year honeymoon period, and the only thing that I can clearly remember about that is they told my mom, just don't give him ice cream at night. And if you do, give it to him during the day. And let him play it off, run it off. And so he got to go along for a year without insulin. And somewhere in there, my family, my mom and my brother moved to join my dad and I in Virginia. And he ended up with a really good endocrinologist at Georgetown because we were so near DC. And he's always done really, really well too.
Interesting. So your parents had some background, a number of years, in fact, and then they got another child diagnosed, and then they got a different kind of medical backup. Did you see his care being much different than yours? US Med takes over 800 private insurers, and they accept Medicare nationwide. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, and they always provide 90 days worth of supplies. US Med carries everything from insulin pumps and diabetes testing supplies to the latest in CGMs, like Freestyle Libre 2 and Dexcom G6. Better service and better care is what you're going to get from US Med. Head over there now to usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514 to get your free benefits check and to get started. You're going to get white glove treatment at US Med. They are the #1 fastest growing tandem distributor nationwide, the #1 specialty distributor for Omnipod DASH. They're where we get Arden's Omnipod 5 supplies from. They also are the #1 distributor for Freestyle Libre systems nationwide and the #1 rated distributor in Dexcom customer service satisfaction surveys. Come on, usmed.com/juicebox. Everybody gets their diabetes supplies from somewhere, and everybody knows how much of a pain it can be. US Med says they're going to give you better service and better care than what you're accustomed to. Today's episode of the podcast is sponsored by InPen from Medtronic Diabetes, and I would like to tell you a little bit about it. The InPen is an insulin pen, but it's not just an insulin pen. Yes, it has a cap, and yes, it has a needle, and a cartridge, and a little window where you can see how much you're dosing, little knob you twist at the end, and a button you push. It's an insulin pen, right? Just like you expect. But here's the stuff you don't expect. How about an app on your cell phone that shows you reports, easily shareable reports, with data that is generated for up to 90 days? InPen can do that because it's connected to that app by Bluetooth. The InPen app is also going to give you an activity log so you can see a list of recent actions, including doses, meals, and glucose readings. Your active insulin remaining is right there on the screen with that InPen app. See how much insulin is still working in your body. And InPen has a dosing calculator to help you take the guesswork out of dosing your insulin. The app uses your glucose levels and a carbohydrate estimate to recommend the dose that's right for you. That sounds like a thing you get with an insulin pump. It even considers the amount of insulin that's still working in your body to help you avoid lows. InPentoday.com/juicebox. Want a digital logbook? InPen has that. Want carb counting support? Oh, well, the InPen app can help you estimate carbs based on your meal size. There's also a fixed dose option that allows you to choose the same carb amount for a specific meal each day. Seems too good to be true? It isn't. InPentoday.com/juicebox. Head over there now. Get started today. There are links in the show notes of your podcast player and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to the InPen, US Med, and all of the sponsors of the Juicebox Podcast. When you click the links, you're supporting the show. InPen requires a prescription and settings from your healthcare provider. You must use proper settings and follow the instructions as directed, or you could experience high or low glucose levels. For more safety information, visit InPenToday.com.
Yes. When he went to, so first of all, he was on two types of insulin, but they were still, he said purified pork was his initial long acting. And he went to this doctor at Georgetown, and the doctor told him, here's my plan. And it was kind of rigid carbohydrates distributed through meals and snacks. The rest of his food intake, because he was growing, so he was 11 almost at that point, is whatever you want, protein or vegetables or, other things can fill in the gaps. But he basically told my brother and my mom, but my brother, because he wanted to influence him, if you don't do what I tell you, you won't be able to be my patient anymore, and something to the effect of, and I'm really good. And I believe because of how well my brother did, he was probably kind of accurate in that.
No kidding. And so he just sort of gave him the high school football coach version of like, you're going to do it my way, or you don't get to be you don't get to be on the team. And did he have better outcomes than you, or were we still not measuring outcomes at that point? We're not, right? 75.
We're not measuring anything. I think that, he probably had some more hypoglycemia, but it's hard to know. But like me, he played sports. He played soccer that traveled up to Canada and all over. He just did well. I was in a Girl Scout troop that backpacked all over Southern California. We would be in the mountains, the desert, the beach, you name it. We were camping out, and I did that. And I don't remember episodes of hypoglycemia through that. I tried to ask my sister, because she was older than me, do you remember me having any struggles like that? She's like, no. And she didn't remember what I carried to help me. She remembers my mom giving me juice, here and there. But
Well,
I only have one. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, when you're doing those one shots, if you're eating, there's probably not a ton of opportunity to be low. And because what do you think your A1C probably was?
I don't know, because the first one I got, I don't know what it was, but I know when I wanted to get pregnant with my daughter, she was born in 88. I knew I had to have 2 under 7 A1Cs, and I worked out continuously, and I achieved that. And I planned my pregnancy carefully. Luckily for me, things worked that way. And I was able to have her at the right time. She was only born 4 days early. She was 7 pounds, normal size. All the things went right. So
let me take a tiny bit of a detour here for a second. You ever have those shocking moments when you realize you're older than you think you are?
Yes.
It happened to me a moment ago when you, who are 61 years old, told me that your daughter was born the year before I graduated from high school. But in my mind, you're 61. I know this is stupid. I'm 50, and you're much older than I am, except you're not. and I like it. I didn't stop my heart, but it froze me for half a second. You were like, she was born in 88. And I was like, oh God, why am I so old? I
think about all that time, because my daughter is 33 years old. And I'm like, no way. How?
Yeah. And even when I hear that, I'm like, oh, her daughter's kind of getting older. 17
crazy.
Years younger than me. But that really took me for a loop. What really stuck to me is that you had an A1C in the 8s, I'm guessing, and you exercised your way into the 7s?
I don't really know what it was
prior.
Before. All I know is I've always exercised. So that makes it sound like I overdid it. I just made sure that I didn't miss any consistency. And I always ate pretty well, but all of us have our little things now and then. But I did have a turning point with when I was a dietitian in Washington, D.C. that made me really focus on my eating. But I'll tell you that in a second. And so I just made sure that I wasn't over 7 by being a little extra careful.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time I have record of an A1C is when I went on my first pump in 1992, and it was my baseline before the pump was 7.8. So not terrible.
Yeah, it's really interesting. How many children do you have in total?
I just have her because in spite of the fact I did maintain really good blood sugars and A1Cs and all those. Now, granted, because we don't know what things like time in range were then, I was pretty clear of any problems, side effects, anything. And then I was somewhere in my pregnancy with her, and I was working at Johns Hopkins Oncology Center, and I went to see the eye center there, which is world renowned, and they decided I needed a little lasering to keep my eyes good. There was some beginnings of retinopathy. So I did that. I had her, I start jogging to get back, the pregnancy weight off. And I had a little retinal bleed, and I went in and I'm like, what the hey? And I said, I thought I was so good. And they just said that the way my little capillaries grew around my eye, it made them more fragile to the jarring movement. I don't know, but I was jogging, and so they treated me again, and then I was stable pretty much forever. Retinopathy has been my only side effect, but I have full sight. I just, have had to keep on it and keep treating it.
It's interesting to listen to somebody talk about that many years ago, because when you're saying, like, I got it into the 7s, it was good, that whole thing. I think now pregnancy, they want you in the low, like in the 5s, or to be pregnant.
Right. Yeah. Those were those days, of course.
No, it's interesting. But I'm saying, I'm not judging it. I just think it's interesting to hear it. And it's good of you to talk about the retinopathy issue too, because even though that was a standard, and everyone, I'm guessing based on technology, this was kind of the best anybody could do, but you still ended up having an issue with it. And because there are people nowadays who hear, well, like, I have a 7, I'm okay. And I'm like, well, for now, maybe, there's all this stuff that you could be doing, or ways to understand your insulin better, that could put you in a situation where maybe you're not getting your eyes lasered one day, I
know.
Yeah. What was that experience like?
It wasn't terrible. It's just, depending on how much they did at a time, I might have a nagging headache afterwards, but I normally drove myself to and from. I didn't, it wasn't something that took away my day.
Okay.
And
it helped? Did it stop the progression?
For the most part. And then, so fast forward, I'm living in where I live now in Arkansas. And, I had just been to see the ophthalmologist. Mm-hmm. My eyes were good. My A1C, because once I got on the pump, my A1Cs stayed like 5.3, 5.5 up to low 6s. I think I might have hit a 6.7, 6.8 occasionally. Mm-hmm. This is without CGM. But so I had like a massive bleed in my left eye. And I just like the day after I'd been to the eye doctor. And I got on their emergency line. I'm like, what in the world? So they told me, raise your head up, do this, do that. And all the blood cleared. And ever since, I think there's probably been somewhere in there, there's probably a little more laser treatment. It's kind of hard to remember before or after that. But every time I go now, and I only go once a year to the specialist, the retinal specialist, he's like, you have a perfect macula. Everything looks so stable. They're always pretty amazed. But again, that's because I kept my control good.
Yeah. You did get it lower too. And as the technology, you did what I think is the greatest thing. As the technology became available, you didn't shy away from it. And yeah, that's I think really important, honestly. Hey, what did you do for a living as an adult?
So I have I graduated from the University of Connecticut with my Bachelor of Science in Clinical Dietetics. So I became a dietitian.
Mm-hmm.
And I did clinical work for a while. And then I ended up I always liked the idea of being with corporations because you had job advancement opportunities. So I ended up with a nursing home corporation, and I kind of covered like a lot of the East Coast, Virginia, Maryland, DC. I went to their nursing homes and did sort of quality assurance and some charting and just made sure they were feeding people appropriately. And somewhere in there, the people that were in charge of writing the menus, and this was a large company, there were like 1,200 nursing homes, wanted to move the position out of a dietitian's basement in Pittsburgh into the corporate office that had opened in Arkansas. And so they started talking to me about it because I've always, this is going to sound very braggy, but I'm pretty smart. You know, I do pretty well. I can stay organized. So those things were recognized by other people.
Yeah.
And so I applied, and they moved me into here in their headquarters, which the company doesn't exist anymore. It eventually went away, it got bought and this and that. But they had me run their menu program, which I had to supervise like dietitians in certain regions to make sure the food matched the food preferences of the people that lived there.
Monica,
are
you telling me that you followed your husband to Virginia, so he had to follow you to Arkansas?
So I am on my third marriage, which I've been in 20 years.
You left him in Virginia?
I left a husband back in Maryland and brought my daughter, she was 3.5, to Arkansas. And the job opportunity was great because then it could, help that happen.
Gotcha.
And got here, and, because in your different segments, you do things with mental health. I did 2 bad choices. Who knows why? Because I'm assertive on the job, but apparently not so in my personal life, or wasn't. And so after some therapy, I became the same person across the board, assertive, able to speak for myself well. And I always tease my current husband, you're probably sorry I got all that therapy. So,
of the 3 of them, you're having the least good time, just so you know.
Although he's hung with me 20 years, so it's all good.
But you talk about how old were you when you got married the first time?
So I was 26, I believe. And then my daughter 2 years later. And then she was 3.5 when I decided he unfortunately had some problems and drinking and some things that just we needed to go for the best of both of us. Yeah. And
Talk about for a second though what you meant by not being as assertive. You like just letting things happen that you knew weren't right, or you didn't feel like you had the agency to speak up, that kind of stuff?
So my parents, so this is what led me to this place, but my parents always tried to help in the communities and things. My dad was active with fair housing in our Southern California town, so that, whatever you looked like, you could move into that neighborhood. And it was a super wonderful mix of ethnicities and races and things like that over time. And so in that mindset of helping people, I think I took on the wrong belief that you could not just help them, but fix them. So I apparently started to attract to myself fixers, people that needed fixing.
Yeah.
And instead of just people that could be your partner. And I had that happen twice. The first one, you had somebody on the first one, because of his alcoholism, ended up being somewhat abusive, more verbal than physical, but a little physical. And so when I left that situation, I didn't get help right away to get me past that. And it's easy then to fold yourself in with someone else, not exactly the same, but just not right. And so those things happened. But fortunate for me, my best friend is like a psychological examiner. So she's got her master's in psychology, and she was able to get me to somebody that was really competent and very, very helpful.
Kind of break you free of the idea that you were going to be able to help people who maybe didn't want the help or were beyond the help, or maybe it just wasn't your job to begin with to help them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yep.
amazing that you did that. And, I seriously,
Takes work and
yeah.
stress and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. And it benefited your daughter, I imagine.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And my husband now, he's just, she's a part of the family, because it's been so long. When we got together, his son, he has 4 children, but his youngest was 9 and my daughter was 13. So kind of, they learn to be together and do things.
Cool.
Yeah.
Does your daughter have any autoimmune issues?
Not that we know of at this point. I was taught that, if you birth them and you breastfeed them, you have the potential to protect them. That may not be true, but I breastfed her for several months, like her attached to me. And then when I went back to work, I did pumping so I could keep her on breast milk for almost a year, frozen, we thawed out and give it to her.
Did you do
so
that?
I always felt like that was healthy.
Yeah. Did you do that because somebody told you to, or you just had a feeling like this could maybe help and I have diabetes, so let's give her the best chance? Was that the vibe?
Somewhere in there, I was told that. I cannot remember the exact source.
Okay.
Again, things were evolving in knowledge and all that.
Yeah. Can we take a detour for half a second?
Please.
You said your mom lived to 90 and you worked in the system where people are, helping older people live at the end of their life. Did your mom have to live in a facility ever?
Yes. Let me think. My dad lived to be 87. So my mom had a stroke when she was 78, and she was super healthy. I mean, this woman worked out, did yoga, did all kinds of things, but they said just genetically, and it was blood pressure related, probably it would have happened sooner if she hadn't eaten the way she did and exercise and maintained being quite thin. So she has a stroke. My dad's trying to help take care of her, and my sister, because they were in Northern Virginia and I'm now in Arkansas. My sister was kind of keeping an eye on what was going on, and my dad started to be a little different. So ultimately we figured out he had Alzheimer's, and they needed to be somewhere safe for them. Yeah. So they moved him into an assisted living place initially, and then over time more to a memory care unit in the same facility. And
talk about for a second what people should be looking for, or like what are some red flags when you're looking at places like that?
My sister did more of the research, but we looked at the ratings that the state gives them. We looked at, their staffing ratios, what kind of programs they offer, the social programs. And when they're in assisted living, they can often go on trips. They carry them in a van or a bus to activities. So they did theater, they did different things. And my parents, because we grew up in California, they always enjoyed wine. And so they do even like little cocktail hour at the assisted living, and people had a glass of wine, and some appetizers. So they did a lot of things that fit the lifestyle for them. Mm. Yeah. By the way, I didn't stay with long-term care. I ended up in pharmaceutical sales. Okay. So
doing that as well.
That's where I spent 22 years also.
Wow. I just, something rung in my head a minute ago, and I kind of was Googling while you were answering that question. This is interesting. Some people are starting to call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes.
Really?
Yeah. So I'll read you something from Healthline. Some research studies have proposed that Alzheimer's disease should be also classified as the type of diabetes called type 3 diabetes. A term has been proposed to describe the hypothesis that Alzheimer's, which is a major cause of dementia, is triggered by a type of insulin resistance and insulin-like growth factor dysfunction that occurs specifically in the brain. And if we Google Alzheimer's autoimmune, new research published in the Journal of Applied Laboratory Medicine identified specific autoantibodies that mistakenly target the body's own tissues in the cerebral spinal fluid of Alzheimer's patients. I guess this is a doctor's name, says adds to the evidence that this might be an autoimmune disorder.
Super weird.
What did your mom have?
Has always done biological research. So tying back to this just quickly, he at one of the companies he worked at, they had developed some kind of a evaluation to see if you might be at risk with certain things in your bloodstream. And he tested himself and my sister, and they didn't match up. And I was like, oh, great. I'm the only one you haven't tested. I was like, if 1 out of 5 or something can match, I might be in that mix. So
I'm sorry, I started to step on you, but I'm glad you finished your thought first. But did your mom have any autoimmune stuff?
No. She had some asthma, and then somewhere along the lines, even though she was never a smoker, she ended up with a lung cancer tumor that they luckily were able to radiate and stabilize, and it never progressed. But that's kind of all for her.
I don't think that it's categorized yet, excuse me, this way, but asthma is caused by an overreaction from the immune system to certain triggers.
Mm-hmm.
So you might not have had a chance, you and your brother and your sister. You might have been destined for this,
Yes. And, there's, in the town that I live in, there's an osteopathic medical school. And when they first opened up, I think it's been 3 years ago now, I met the team that was going to be instructing the students there. And one of them was, or maybe more than one, was an adult onset type 1. And he got approval initially to do research with the people that are adult onset type 1s. And I don't know what happened, because I don't think they're still at the school. And I was super curious about that, because I've, known some people that, had that. But I always thought, man, they need to just study broadly these crazy autoimmune families, and fit that in the mix too.
I have talked to enough people at this point where I just think I can't say, I'm not a doctor, I haven't done a study, but it's fairly obvious, that autoimmune can travel in bloodlines, and it's really something. But can I ask you, overall, looking back, you've had diabetes for 58 years, geez, and do you see it as a major impact on your life aside of health, or do you not feel that way about it?
I never have. I just do everything. And, in the last few years, but these are the things that people make assumptions about longtime diabetics, especially those that have some science backgrounds, that we know everything we need to know. But I didn't know all the things we're at risk of, like you, and some of your other people have talked about this: carpal tunnel, trigger finger, frozen shoulder, all those things. I didn't know there was higher risk because I was diabetic. I just, I've had those things, but they're not still present in my life. Like they've been fixed, or, I do the work to help them go away. But I think, people need to know at least what to look for, and the more the reasons why to take better care of themselves. And I know you think that some of the people that were without technology always believed hyperglycemia was better than hypoglycemia. But in my family, that wasn't it, because we always felt like you can fix hypoglycemia. Mm-hmm. You can drink some juice, you can eat something, but you can't fix that chronic needling away in your bloodstream and your nerves and your organs.
You didn't have an insulin that you could just try to correct with. You were stuck waiting for the next time to inject, and that was that.
But we also, I can't remember a time I wasn't on my bike at the playground playing basketball or football with the boys. I
Yeah.
just can't remember not doing that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it, my current nurse practitioner says, I think that's why you're as good as you are now.
It's just so active. Yeah. Well, I mean, you grew up in a warm place too in the 60s.
Yes,
So, I'm assuming there was a lot of like, bye, mom. And then you come back 8 hours later, stuff like that going on. Right. I mean, that's what we used to do. Just we'd run out the door in the morning and never come home. So,
absolutely.
yeah. Well, it
Yeah.
all makes sense. I mean, activity is incredibly important. It is,
Hmm.
it definitely helps insulin work better. It helps you, it helps your digestion, and digesting your food through you shortens the amount of time that it's in there impacting your blood sugar. I mean, there's all kinds of great reasons to be active for certain, for everybody, not just for people with type 1.
Yes.
Now, so you didn't really feel a big impact on your life, but I do want to ask you, maybe, I don't care what the answer is, I'm just interested. When technology became a part of your life, and I haven't asked you, like, you pump or no?
Oh, yes. So, 2 years ago, 2019, late, so it'd be almost this time, I got on. So I've been doing technology, but not so much with CGM. I got on a tandem with a Dexcom G6. Love, love, love it.
Mm.
And before that, I'd worn a pump since 1992. The model of pump I had before the tandem was one of the Medtronic models that did have a CGM associated with it. So if somebody out there gets mad for me saying this, I was on a model like a Paradigm 5. It's an older model. And the then CGM I felt was terrible. So I didn't wear it for the longest time. And then I began to wear it, you'll laugh, but every other week. And I don't know why I picked that random thing, but I just thought at least now and then I can be checking, what it looks like. Um, and so I did that for a few years or a couple years anyway. But I didn't like how it had to be applied, that it only lasted 6 days, just things. So the Dexcom, and I started researching these different CGMs. I also looked in before I changed to the Tandem. I did get an Omnipod sent to me, the little trial thing. I did several things. I think I wanted the technology of Tandem only had the basal IQ at the time. And then I knew in 6 months the CIQ was coming.
Yeah.
And I wanted that. And I didn't like the Medtronic system deciding your basal for you and doing all those kind of that auto mode,
Okay.
even though I know you can do adjustments with that. And no one really taught me, and this, so I don't mean to be blaming someone else. I'm responsible for me, but the pre-bolusing thing was only ever brought up to me on pump therapy once or twice. But in my sales job and some of my other things I did, I tried that, and I had so many where I'd fall out the bottom events because of you'd be out eating, food never came, different things, that I stopped doing that. And I would just dose when I saw the food. And so I probably had the bouncy effects, you go up and then you normalize, you go up and then you normalize. So the Tandem with the Dexcom has given me a lot of information, and I really, really value it. And it's the Tandem community on Facebook, the private group, that led me to you,
Oh,
to your
cool.
podcast.
Oh, I'm glad. That's lovely. I have a question. Do you think that when you switched from your older pump, and by the way, I think this is the part where I say, I'm sorry, Medtronic, I don't control what people think about your stuff. And then we move on to where I did not know any of this about Monica, please.
And I actually really respect them and their research and it's just personal preferences.
I understand.
So that's their science is good. So I don't have a judgment on that.
Monica,
so,
this has just become a running joke in the podcast. That's all. So I just have to keep it going. But my question is it possible that prior to Dexcom and Control IQ, is it possible you were running heavier basal than you should have been? So do you remember your basal going down when you got to a CGM?
Um, well, so because my age and my life have changed some, the answer is actually no, but I know, like,
Because why I'm
I
asking, Monica, why I'm asking is I'm picking through the idea of, is it possible that before you could see your, you could see your blood sugar in real time, where you were maybe doing that MDI thing of like a heavier basal to keep your A1C lower and then kind of feeding the insulin before you got low situation, and then pre-bolusing wouldn't have worked for you. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think that the old rule that the people like the nurse practitioners, they would talk to me about is, oh, you don't want your basal to be greater than 50%. I think that rule has changed a little bit, but so mine was sometimes 55, 57, something went in there. So you're probably right in terms of their thinking at the time too. But yes.
Okay.
And yeah,
That's super
yes.
interesting.
And
Yeah, I mean,
mhm.
it's just being able to see your blood sugar is obviously just such a game changer, about making decisions. And then the algorithm on top of it is probably magical
Mhm.
to you after living with diabetes for this much time.
Yes, and since I've been on this system, my A1C has been essentially 5 to 5.3. So since 2 years ago, um, and so that's great, and it's consistent that way. And my time in range is 93 to 95% with a standard deviation. It depends, but sometimes it's 27. I think it's gone up as much as 33 standard deviation, but
That's
um,
really terrific.
uh, yeah,
Yeah.
always within the acceptable range. And it's interesting. My brother uses a Dexcom, but he does MDI, and we were talking about that, and they'd always just looked at his A1C, and he said he's changed endos, and the one he has now was talking about time in range, and they ran his, and his is like either 95 or 97%. I don't know his standard deviation, but he's done really well.
That's excellent.
Um,
It's really cool. It's good. It's amazing, actually. I mean, that you guys have been, persevering like this and doing such great jobs for yourselves. And it's even nice that you're still considering looking out for your sister. Really,
mhm.
really wonderful, because people need help. That you can't know everything about this stuff. And you
No.
find information, and it's great to pass on. I mean, you said that somebody from a tandem group told you about the podcast.
Yes. So I don't know. Okay, I wasn't a Facebook person, and then in 2020, I began my dietitian's private practice. I left the pharma, and I opened up my own. It's just part time, but business. So I got on Facebook to do some of and Tandem said something about to look at something of theirs, you should go on Facebook. I don't know, it was a video or a Facebook Live or something. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get on Facebook. And part of that was a time factor in my old job. I just had too many things to do on a computer, and I didn't want one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
But so I got on there for dietitians Facebook Lives, Tandem's Facebook Lives, and then I saw this Tandem group, and in there, people will ask questions a little bit like the Facebook group for Juicebox, and people would offer their advice of either the sugar surfing book and or your podcast,
Oh, no
and they
kidding.
might even cite an episode. And I was like, I guess I need to go over and get on that podcast. And so I've been just picking and choosing some of the episodes initially, and then I'll get through all of them, but I chose the ones that would help me best with the CIQ, because I was still struggling with the roly-poly thing. I
Sure,
was
sure,
like,
of
come
course.
on,
Yeah.
euglycemia is the answer that I want, and I'm only seeing it sometimes.
What episodes helped you? Were it the loop episodes about the algorithms, or
Um,
no?
the pre-bolusing, the things like feet on the floor, because I would always say to my the nurse practitioner I see, I get up in the morning, I'm 87, I walk around for a few minutes, I I didn't always drink water first thing in the morning, which is something I know as a dietitian anyway, but I didn't do it initially. And I'm like, up to 130. What is going on? And so just things like that. And just again, though, being able to see it, and I also started looking at my night times, which are not bad, but I was like, why do I have these little rises and, peaks and valleys? They're narrow, but they're in there. So I adjusted my basal and it's pretty much straight across now. So
good for you.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I'm glad it was helpful. I really am. If it was helpful at all, it's amazing. Really cool.
It's been really, really good. And you and Jenny are amazing and the tips and things. And so I mostly referred to things that were related to me and pump therapy. So if there was a pro tip on MDI or something, I bypassed some of that. And, so certain things I'd go past just because I needed specific things.
Yeah, no, I understand. I really do. I think that, just the act of listening to the show, I think is helpful. And I could make a reasonable argument that even if you listen to the stuff you're not interested in, that there'll be something in it that could help you, meaning like MDI when you're pumping or vice versa. But I take your point. And I mean, it's not like there are 500 and I don't know how many episodes. I don't know how many episodes there are anymore. There's a lot of them. So, you can't just listen to everything if you don't have the time. But
I just prioritize them.
Yeah.
It's not really that I don't plan to listen to them. I sort of made, listen to the ones that were going to have more, what I felt like immediate effect.
Oh, you like the podcast, don't you?
I do.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
What made you want to come on?
Well, just thinking about, I think, and I said in the email that just, I feel lucky, but lucky with the fact that I also have, invested in doing things for myself, just because I came into the time zone that, people didn't do well in terms of 1963, and matter of fact, I went 9 years to a diabetic camp for kids. And sorry, I'm adjusting my ear thing. It was crawling out of my ear. Did I do something?
You're fine. Can you hear me?
Okay, good. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Where there are people from that camp that I went for years with that are blind, dead, etc. And, amputations and things like that. I have a friend in St. Louis from there that just got out of the hospital because she was having terrible blood sugars. And so though the people that I was around and, we came through a good camp that was based out of Loma Linda University and taught a lot of good things, but there weren't the technology and things to help make that journey better like it is now.
Yeah. Do you think
it can be now?
Do you think that the information, I mean, that's an obvious question, but the information from back then versus now is just, it's night and day, right? It's like was there anything that you were taught back then that has real value in today's world?
The staying active, yes. Mm-hmm. And I probably do some of the things you guys talk about with, I kind of think about the too much insulin thing, but I think it back to what I'm eating. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, do I need to have that much of that food? Because it's going to lead me to take a big old giant dose of insulin. I'd probably do, that's old world thinking, and I probably have a little bit that hangs around. Yeah. But if I really want something, I'm going to try to figure out how to dose for it and forget the amount of insulin.
So a good balance of common sense and technology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think that's great. Do you have a particular eating style or not really?
Not really, but what I've done, because again, my life is a little different. So days that I have clients in my office and I'm going to be in there and sitting for a good portion of the day. I mean, I get up and walk around the block near my office because, it's a decent downtown area. I will tend to eat a low carb lunch. So I go get a grilled chicken salad, something like that, where I've always been so active that for fitness reasons, I ate high carb. More than 55% of my diet was carbs. because of how much I did. I bicycled, I ran, I
Right.
strength trained, I did all of it. So now, because I'm a little less active, age, we move, just a number of different things. I don't have that level of, I don't on a Saturday go ride 30 miles on my bike anymore.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean I don't do things. I do things, but different. So I can give myself the freedom to not think, oh, I need to have my glycogen all built up for that long run or ride. I'm okay to eat a low carb lunch and
Yeah.
think different about it. But I've been playing around with some vegetarianism, and like we had something last night. I tortured my husband with trying my new ideas. So, but I don't have a style.
I'm sure he was thrilled. I'm sure he was absolutely thrilled. Did you like it? Whatever you made, did it end up being good, or were you in the same
It
boat?
actually was good. We just had to, it was red lentil and sweet potato soup. And so vegan. And it was spicy, but I was like, it's spicy without flavor. What's the deal here? And he's like, it just needs salt. And so, I've been trying to cut back on sodium for both of our good health. And
Yeah.
so it's finally like, okay, put some salt in it.
Just needs
But
salt and some cubed up sirloin steak. And
so that's the funniest thing about him. So I'll think, oh, I'm going to make a pot of beans. And I'm thinking, onion, celery, jalapeno, something. And he's like, where's the meat? And he literally said, just get me a can of Spam. And I about gag when he talks about Spam, but he could eat Spam. So,
oh my God, I think I've had that as a child. I think we fried it.
yeah, that's what he said he did too.
Terrible. Now, thinking back on it, that's really terrible. Oh my gosh. Monica, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you hope to?
I was going to say that people on both Facebook sites, yours and the one tied to Tandem, talk about endocrinologists and oh, you need to get with your endo. So even though I live in what's considered the second or third biggest city in the state, we have for more than a decade been lucky if we have one endocrinologist.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky, which is the situation now. So when there were none and I needed to find somebody, because I was in my pharmaceutical job, I, just asked a doctor to the side. I was like, internal medicine, would I need to find a doctor? I have type 1 diabetes. Would you be willing to care for me? And almost universally, it was like, I'd really prefer not to. And I was saying, well, do you know that I'm also a whole person and I'm over the age of 50 and I need other care, not just the diabetes, and I'm stable, and it was really bizarre.
Yeah.
So finding good care is a luxury.
It certainly is. Yeah, it certainly is.
Yeah.
And it's not that easy. And that's why diabetes, and to be perfectly honest, most health issues that run long term, you need to understand them for yourself. Like you can't just go to a doctor and then shut yourself off and then wait to go back to the doctor again. And then if you have problems, just go, I mean, I did what the doctor told me. You can't, you have to take real agency over yourself. And you just need to. There's no way around it. You're not going to do as well if you wait for someone else to help you. It's just, I mean, I've just seen it be true over and over again. And I don't think it has, like I said, I'm beginning to see that I don't think it has as much to do with diabetes. It's just in general how healthcare works. And not to even say that it's bad, it's cutting edge and it's probably as good as it's ever been on the planet. But it's still, people aren't with you every day. They don't have the same concern about you as you have about yourself. And,
yes.
And they see you as a management thing, which is reasonable. And, you're trying to live a life. So taking good care of yourself is the best thing you can do. I think that's why the podcast does as well as it does.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I'm happy that it was valuable for you or anybody who listens, honestly.
And I think that the people saying, "Oh, you're doing good" or whatever is usually relative to their uncontrolled folks, be they type 1 or type 2. So they're and I would have this fighting with the endocrinologist when we had like 4 of them in town. Um, you're saying I'm doing good, but my A1C went up and it's still inside the mid sixes, but it used to be closer to 5, 7 or something. And I was like, we need to adjust something because this level of good is not my good.
Yeah, good is an interesting word I've noticed when talking to people. It's always relative. It's always compared to just something that's worse. And no matter what it is, like, how you doing today?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Your leg got chopped off in an accident, but you just saw a guy who lost both of his arms. You're like, well, I'm doing better than the guy with no arms. And it really is. It needs to be. And that's why I always push people on it when they say something like, how's your A1C? It's good. What does that mean? You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Even like back in the day, they told you you're 7, you're good. And well,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it could have been better. They didn't know it back then. And you could be in that situation modern day where you're at a practice where everybody's got an A1C, 7s or 8s, and your 6'9" looks genius to people. And they're like, oh, don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'm telling you your 6'9's bad. It's just there's room. You can do something about it, or your variability.
Mm-hmm.
I think is probably as important. I mean, I can't make the distinction for you, but it's as important as your A1C. It's you don't want your blood sugar to be bouncing around.
And the other thing that I believe now, so as more and more people are on the technology, so I said, I'm fortunate the nurse practitioner I see worked in the endocrinology department for years and years and years, and she's a CDE, so she's really on top of things. But I said to her, and she was training another nurse practitioner, I don't know why the postprandial glucoses at 2 hours for people like me, and I wasn't criticizing, saying you and people like you should be asking us to be under 140. I mean, preferably lower, but I'm just saying that's a normal person's 2 hour postprandial glucose
Mm-hmm.
can go up to 140. And why we're still using that 180 number as good, in quotes, doesn't make sense in a kind of like a hybrid closed loop.
Yeah.
We're almost like pancreases over here, and so I'm going to try to talk to you about being under that 140 and actually obviously strive for better than that, but just as putting a lower cap on things. And
I think I say it here pretty often, but to me, if you get to 140 after a meal, like, okay, I think of 160 as a miss and 180 as a spike.
yeah,
Like that's how I think of it.
yeah.
Like, I'm not saying your blood sugar is always going to be like super 83, 85, 92, 101. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to go up. Sometimes you're going to miss on your bolus at times, or miscalculate carbs, or whatever is going to happen. You can have a site that's going bad. There's a million things that could happen, but
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's about stopping it and not letting it get out of hand. And
Yep.
then that's where you run into problems where, people who are, haven't been around type 1 as long, or haven't heard about, ideas, are going to start telling you, well, you can't stack your insulin. You're going to get low. And, I don't think you should stack insulin either. I'm not saying that. But if you bolus for 45 carbs, reach 130, and your blood sugar's shooting up, and it turns out the meal was 55 carbs, well, then putting in the extra insulin's not stacking, it's covering the carbs. But
Yeah.
but it's a distinction that gets lost on people sometimes. And then they watch their 140 turn into 180, and their 180 to turn into 250, and their 250 turn into 300. And then they get caught in that like void of like, oh, well, it's going to come back down. I don't want to put in insulin and make myself low. And they just start staring at the high blood sugar and waiting and waiting and waiting. And before you know it,
Mm-hmm.
they're super high. They don't have any idea how to bring it down. And eventually they are going to cause a low, because it's going to take so much insulin to break it free. So yeah, I like using insulin sooner to avoid highs. I also
Mm-hmm.
like it because it often means you're using less insulin, which should result in fewer lows later.
Precisely. Yeah.
That's just how I think about it.
Yep.
Sounds like
I
you
have
do
two
too.
meals that I haven't figured out, and I like cottage cheese. I know a lot of people don't. And in the morning, sometimes I'll have some cottage cheese on the side of a piece of toast. And I'm like, I don't care what I do at this point. I haven't figured that one out. It's going to shoot up to 180. And I'm like, I keep bringing that pre-bolus earlier. And oatmeal. Oatmeal is like the greatest food, but I have not gotten that one to quite work out right. So I'm like, we're going to keep playing. I'm not going to let it win.
You just keep fighting and trying. One day you'll find it too. One day you'll find the measure and mix of, pre-bolus and amount, and you'll just be like, oh my God, it worked. And that's it. Then, you'll be like you'll be sick of oatmeal because you tried it so many times to figure it out.
Exactly. Anyway, but those like I figured out most of the foods, but those two are still my little uphill climb, but I'll figure it out.
Good for you. Well, Monica, this has been terrific. I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking to me like this. I had a really good time, and you have a lot of wealth of knowledge and perspective, and I appreciate you sharing it with everybody.
Well, thank you for letting me. It's been really enjoyable, and I enjoy listening to all of your interviews.
Thank you. Well, I think people will enjoy this one as well. Thank you so much to InPen from Medtronic Diabetes for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Please remember to head over to inpentoday.com if you'd like to learn more about that insulin pen that talks to that app through Bluetooth. I also want to thank US Med and remind you that you can get a free benefits check right now at usmed.com/juicebox or by dialing 888-721-1514. I'd also like to thank Monica for coming on the show and sharing her story. And thanks to you as well for listening, downloading, subscribing, and sharing the Juicebox Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.